I'm Noor Jahan from the Ashna Trust, and our vision is to support Muslim women's initiative for justice, peace and development. Before I begin, I would like to share a little story. Um, Sana Patel, she is my colleague and she is 23 years of age. She is married, she is uneducated, and she goes off to sleep without food for about in a week, thrice she doesn't have food to eat. She's got 3 children. Her husband is alcoholic and unemployed. And when she complains to him about the problems that she's facing, he says, well, if you complain more, I'm going to orally divorce you. I'll say talaq to you and you'll be thrown out of the house. And worse, he says, I will not divorce you, but I'll remarry and I'll get another woman in this house, and then you've had it. Sana goes to her mother's house the next day and she tells her, look, this is my problem. And she says, you have my shoulder to weep on, but you can't stay here. You have to go back to your husband and you have to manage. So Muslim women is impacted by her class. She's poor. She's impacted by her gender. She's a woman. And she's impacted by the community that she belongs to. She's a Muslim. So she is triply marginalized, and she is, in short, a minority within a minority. Let us look at what are the kind of problems that she's facing. What is the status of Muslim women in our country? The school enrollment rate is 40%. In rural north, it really dips down to 13%. That means out of a set of 100 girls, only 13 are able to actually go to a school. 17% are able to, just 17% are able to finish 8 years of schooling, and just about 10% are able to finish their higher secondary. 43% of rural Muslim women are illiterate. 70% of them work from their homes, which means they are working in an unorganized and informal sector, which is low paying. This is interesting. 41% of Muslim girls marry before the age of 18. So life takes a different turn because she gets married, she has more than maybe 3 or 4 children, and then that's what she's doing all her life. And 26% of educated Muslim girls have illiterate husbands, which means they cannot go beyond what their husbands are able to achieve, which is illiteracy. Now, what are the reasons? Why is Muslim women so backward today in our country after 65 years of independence? The foremost reason is progressive leadership. Our community has not thrown up leaders who can talk about development. Our leaders don't talk about economic development, educational development, social development. Everything for them is looked at from the prism of religion. Now that doesn't solve much of our problem, because our problems are really socio-economic and educational development. Our leaders have not been able to do that. When I say leaders, it means political leaders, religious leaders, social leaders. We don't have an Ambedkar in our community. The second reason is lack of state support. The state has been really thriving on the Muslim vote. In that sense, all of us know we are the vote banks of this country. But what has the community got in return? We've got no development. We've got nothing out of the entire development process. So both these factors are responsible for what we are today. So what is Ashna Trust doing? Our vision is to enable Muslim women from being victims to citizens. So all along, it's like we, the poor Muslim women, we don't have this, we don't have that, our community is no good, the government is not doing. Fine, we need to move from being victims to being citizens, where we say, look, we are Muslims, we are Indians, and we have a right over all that the state has to offer, the constitutional rights, the legal rights, and we have to start looking at ourselves as citizens of this country. And if we do that, we will be able to access justice, peace and development. It goes in that order. We have justice, we have peace, we'll be able to develop ourselves. So Ashna Trust is the registered organization. We finished 10 years on 10th March. And Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, translating in English, would mean Indian Muslim Women's Movement, is the larger movement of Muslim women that we support. So in that sense, BMMA is the program of, is a big program of Ashna Trust. What are the challenges? I like to talk about the challenges right in the beginning, because we are constantly struggling with these. It's a large population, close to 14% of the entire population of our country. We have to constantly negotiate with conservative groups. The Muslim male is not ready to see a Muslim woman come up on stage and talk about her issues on public forums, in places where she matters. So, for example, when we have public meetings on different issues in different parts of the country, young boys as young as 22, 23 years of age come up and tell me, well, you are not Muslim enough. So what right have you got to talk about the Muslim women? Why I am not Muslim enough? Because I am wearing a sari, because I keep my hair loose, because I wear a blouse where part of my skin is shown. So that makes me not Muslim enough to talk about Muslim women's issues. So these are kind of, this is an example of how constant negotiation, we can't do away with them, they are there, they are part of the community, they are part of the society, we have to learn to deal with them, and we are doing it. We have to make the state responsive. For the state, we don't exist, we are invisible to them, they want to listen to the Muslim male because that's their vote bank. But we have to increase our strength in a way that the state has to look at us, and we have to tell them, look, we exist, we have an opinion, and for the state, we should matter. And for that, it's our responsibility to increase our outreach and impact. And of course, we need a lot of resources. I said we are a large population, so we need a lot of resources to reach out and make impact. So what are the objectives of Ashna Trust? One is to organize and empower through rights-based training, to enable these groups of Muslim women to undertake activities for their own development. Here I would like to add a slogan. We always say, jiski ladai, uski agwai. So if it's my issue, it's going to be my leadership. If it's my problem, then I will have to take the initiative because nobody else is going to do it. So we enable these district leaders, state leaders to undertake activities for their own development. And the third objective is to create local, state and national platforms so that Muslim women are able to come together and assert for their rights. Under each objective, we have several activities. The important ones are we organize Muslim women into Mahila Mandals, Samoos, Samitis, SHGs, and different ways. We could have different names, but basically trying to get them together, get them out of their homes and get them together into groups. Once they are there, we organize a lot of training programs on gender, on their legal rights, on their rights as a citizen of this country, on the various government schemes that are available. Once they have this information, then as a group or as even individuals, they are able to then negotiate with the state, with the community, and able to access government scholarships or even private scholarships, undergo vocational training programs, avail credit facilities so that they can start their own programs, access important cards like the PAN card, ration card, the widow pension card, all those important papers which are important because they they help you assert yourself as a citizen of this country. Accessing health facilities, making the government work. That's what we tell our groups, tell our leaders. You can't, as Subhadra said, how many more health centers can you make? It is the responsibility of the government to make health and educational facilities available to these communities. And of course, working closely with the police so that Muslim women are able to get legal help and support. For our larger advocacy, we are basically a rights-based movement, supporting a rights-based movement. We want to formulate, we are in fact in the process of formulating a gender-just family law. I talked about the story of Sana. She was orally divorced because there is no law which prohibits this man from saying divorce orally. So we need a law in place. We are actually working on a draft. We're doing national consultations across the country, talking to lawyers, experts, women's groups, and actually drafting a family law. Just for the information, there's only one law which was passed in 1939, another law passed in 1986. The rest of the issues of family law are completely uncodified. So we are in the process of filling in this gap and doing this. Linked to this is demanding a ban on oral divorce, implementation of government schemes. So if you are able to come together and tell the government that this particular scheme is not working in our community, and how do we make the government machinery work, and coming together to have better infrastructure within the communities, basically trying to mobilize Muslim women against any unjust practice within or outside the community. So what's the impact of our work? Because of the kind of work that we are doing in 11 states of the country, more and more Muslim women are able to access public spaces. More and more Muslim women are getting opportunity to come together as groups, go out and talk to the government. I remember an incident in Osmanabad where a group of 25 burqa clad women walked across the road and went to the collector's office, and everybody was like, who are these women? Where have they come from? Were they invisible? Were they not existing? But they were all there. Because of our kind of work, they got an opportunity to actually walk out of their homes, go to the collector's office and talk about their issues. Getting more knowledge about their rights, they are also demanding implementation of schemes. Some of our states where our state leaders are actually collaborating and working together with the government for implementing schemes. Demanding law reform, as I said, and drafting an alternative law. And more women are also becoming economically and educationally empowered. What's the quantitative impact? We're working in 11 states with a membership of 35,000 members. We have 250 very active women leaders in these 11 states. We have conducted 200 empowerment sessions with young girls, with women, 300 advocacy meetings on issues of law reform, government implementation of government schemes. We've come up with a conditional nikah-nama over which over 200 marriages have been conducted, and close to 100 consultations on formulating a gender just law. What's our model? We start with identifying Muslim women leaders. We convert them into pressure groups. We give them a lot of information and training and knowledge. And then once they are ready with this knowledge, they are able to impact the they are able to do local advocacy with their own state, village, district governments. And at the national level, once they come together as a national council, we are able to work towards advocating a better implementation of laws across the country and also codifying the Muslim law. What's the innovation? What have we done which other Muslim women's groups have not done? We've actually worked on a women-friendly nikah-nama. Nikah-nama is a marriage document over which, as I said, 200 marriages have happened. We've actually worked on a Muslim family law, drafted a law. I'm not a lawyer, but we felt that law is something which has to be made accessible to people who are not lawyers. It's meant for everyone. It needs to be made accessible. And also raising issues from time to time from the perspective of Muslim women. For instance, about 6 months back, Haji Ali Dargah stopped Muslim women from entering the Sanctum Sanctorum. And our group took that issue up, and we are in the process of taking legal action. So always taking up issues from the perspective of Muslim women. This is the board of trustees. We meet, before that, Khatun Sheikh is our director, Dr. Puri is our, and Sailesh Pandey, they are trustees, and both of them are engaged with different groups. Sailesh does a lot of training on leadership, on team building, and he brings in those skills into the group. Dr. Puri is associated with Mumbai University, so anything to do with education, and he's there. And I'm the founder and managing trustee. We meet thrice a year, and all administrative decisions are taken by the board, by the 4 members. All the programmatic decisions are guided by the BMMA activists. And I'm a founder member of Ashna Trust as well as the movement. So that helps me align the activities of the board of the organization with the movement. So there's no conflict. This is our national team. They are our national state leaders who work in different states. Khatun is in Maharashtra, Jamila in Gujarat, Zebunisa, Safiya, Nishat, Farat in Odisha, Akhtari in Bihar, Rahima in West Bengal, Nasreen in Jharkhand, Nagma in Karnataka, and Kutsia and Rubina in Uttar Pradesh. So this is a very dedicated team of state leaders, and we see to it that we also build up their capacities to carry out programs. Of course, myself and Zakia are the founder members of the Andolan. What's the growth like? We are right now a membership base of 35,000. The Andolan has a membership of 35,000 women. We want to take it to 60, 65 and 70. We are right now in 11 states, want to go on to 14, 16 and 18. Right now we are a staff of 13, which includes the state leaders. There's a jump if you see from 13 to 19. That's because we want a very strong secretariat. If we are going to expand and scale up, we will need a very strong central office to carry out administrative tasks, to be able to do M&E, to be able to gather reports, to be able to do impact assessment. So this increase in the staff is because we need a very strong head office. And of course the number of women that we'll be reaching out to. So the total budget right now is 20, we want to go on to 40, and this again the leap is because we want to have a very strong head office. So this 40 is going to be used in terms of spending 24 on programs, 12 on staff cost and 4 on the operational costs. So over the next 3 years, Ashna Trust would need 1.3 crores to be able to achieve its objectives. What we need to scale, we are actually working right now in different states in partnership with local NGOs. So that helps us actually to scale up and to be able to manage this kind of an outreach. We have zonal leaderships to manage these 11 states. And of course, as we increase more states, our zonal leaders will also, the number of zonal leaders will also increase. Our head office, as I said, we need to expand, and we need to have a very strong monitoring and evaluation systems to track our impact. We do use local NGO base to support our movement. For example, our unit in Odisha is supported by the Bird Trust. Our unit in West Bengal is supported by the Nari aur Shishu Kalyan Kendra. So we have that kind of an NGO support, not just administratively but also financially. The Andolan has a membership fee of 1,000, so that also in that sense helps us to build up the corpus. And of course grants from multiple sources, including some wealthy individuals who are willing to open up their purses. So in the next 10 years, we want to eradicate anti-women customary practices. It's the larger vision that we have about 2 lakh membership, reduce poverty and deprivation. We would like to see Muslim women in positions of, in positions where they are able to impact policies. And of course, codify Muslim family law. We want this codify Muslim law to reach the parliament and get it passed by the parliament in the next 10 years. So we need 1.34 crores for 3 years to give voice, dignity and agency to Muslim women. When you think of Muslim women, think of Ashna Trust.